Well, here we are. Hello, 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 hello. It is so good to be here with you. It's so good to be here with you, especially today. I want to thank God for allowing me just another opportunity to do His will on this side of heaven. It has been a great day, and I hope to have, for the next 45 minutes, a great time with you. And I can't tell you enough how happy I am. Let's do this. How happy I am to be here with you. This is a little bit of technical difficulties, as you can tell, and I'm just so happy to be here and happy to be able to have this live broadcast with you to try to talk to you about something I promised earlier in some of the broadcasts I had, a webinar on being able to have facilitation, or being ready for facilitating difficult conversation. And in this case here, what we're going to talk about is facilitating having the difficult conversations in diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, that is always a difficult subject, especially now with so many different things going on that we know of in these day and age. And I tell you, as a facilitator, you're going to have to develop certain skills to make sure that you have things under control. And more importantly, when you are facilitating, you want to make sure you reach the objective of whatever you're facilitating, whatever you're teaching, whatever you're training. And so what this particular webinar is going to talk about is, how do you facilitate those difficult conversations? How do you actually go out there and do the things you need to do to make sure that the conversation is moving forward productively? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about facilitating those difficult discussions. We're going to talk about what it takes to keep things on board and right, I should say. So what we want to do is let's see if we can get to the slide I'm looking for. Here we are. I told you a little bit of technical difficulties, but we will succeed. Let's see. All right, so why am I not moving forward? Let's find out. Let us do this, and let's see if we can move forward here. So I apologize. Again, you always have technical difficulties when you go live. So this is what we're going to talk about the next 45 minutes here or so. I want to bring your attention to the subject itself. I want to talk to you about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and more particularly in some of the discussions that you're going to be having in these types of conversation and these types of training. So we want to talk about that, and then we want to really get into the meat of this particular webinar, and that is facilitation techniques, and that's what we want to talk about as well. So we want to start by asking you a few survey questions, and here's the first one. Here, think about this. You're facilitating a training opportunity, a training class of a diverse crowd, a diverse group of people that you have, and just wonder, what type of conversations, what type of reactions might you get if you bring up this particular topic or subject here, talk about white privilege? Now, imagine you have a diverse crowd. So you have, let's give a number of 15 people. You have a diverse group of people in front of you, women, men, all colors, all races. They are in this group. And it is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, everyone has their own opinion about what they think diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about. But when you get to those hot topics, those things about race and those things about the differences we all have, that's when you really have interesting conversations. And at some point, it can go to a place you don't want it to go. And as a facilitator, you need to understand what are the techniques that you need to use to make sure that you keep the actual lesson or the training moving in a positive light. And so the first thing we want to talk about, now we don't really want to get into it too much, because I want you to just think about this topic. Imagine that you're in front of 15 people, men, women of different races, different colors, different ages, in the same room with you, and you're facilitating, and you are asking any one of them to define the definition or give a definition of the word or the phrase white privilege. How do you think somebody who is an African American might answer that? And how do you think someone who is Caucasian might answer that? A Caucasian male versus an Indian American, or someone from India or someone from the Middle East answering those questions. We call those people who are from the Middle East. I have a good friend who said he's a brown man. So you will get different answers from different people in your group of 15. So white privilege is one of those things that you know that you're going to have differences of opinions, and you're going to have the opportunity to make sure you allow people to express what they believe the definition is, and keep moving on to the next person, and allow the next person to give their definition of what they think white privilege is. Another topic that you might want to talk about is ghetto conditions. Talk about ghetto conditions. I mean, you know, when you hear the term ghetto conditions, you might think you're only talking about a certain group of people. But imagine hearing it in this diverse crowd. Again, different ages, different races, different skin color, different sexes. You're going to get different answers from each of your participants when it comes to talking about white privilege and talking about ghetto conditions. You want that. You want that information to come out. Now, we're talking diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, and the reason why I say it is because you don't want to hide from any of the conversation. You don't want to hide from the conversation. You're there for a reason, and that reason is to have that conversation, have those difficult conversations, have people communicating to each other and having them get through some of their biases, their racial biases, or the biases that they may have, and actually address some of the blind spots. So again, when you talk about white privilege and when you talk about ghetto conditions, you get people defining it based on where they're from. And here's another one, and this is pretty relevant in this day and age when you talk about Black Lives Matter. Think about that. Imagine the conversation you're going to get from your participants. Imagine that diverse group of people that you have in front of you, different ages, different races, different sex, how they're going to define this. This is just what I want to kind of get in your mind so that you can just have a feeling for what it might feel like being in front of this group, trying to facilitate a conversation. Now, if you've got 15 people, you've got 15 different perspectives. 15 different perspectives on white privilege, 15 different perspectives on ghetto conditions, and 15 different perspectives when it comes to Black Lives Matter. Here's another one. Oh, going by too fast. Make America Great Again. You bring that up, and you're going to get some real serious conversation. It's probably not going to be any more than the other three, but you're going to get differences of opinions when it comes to white privilege, when it comes to ghetto condition, Black Lives Matter, and Make America Great Again. So be ready for that, but don't be afraid to have that discussion. So as a facilitator, what do you need to do? What do you need to do to make sure that you keep the conversation going? What do you need to do to make sure that this is a productive gathering of your participants? What do you need to do to make sure that people walk away with what they came there for, to reach that objective? This is very critical when you're facilitating any topic. But when you're facilitating topics in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and when it talks about, when you get into the real hot button topics, you have to be ready for that. And so there's some techniques, and that's what this particular webinar is going to be all about, talking about those different techniques, some of the things that you really want to pay attention to, and they will help you get through your particular presentation. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about from here, just had the quick survey, I call it a survey, is basically some of the 4 different hot topics that you might have to encounter, and some of the different attitudes that you may have with that. And that's okay, because if you're facilitating this particular subject, diversity, equity, inclusion, you have to be ready for the conversations to go in different directions. So that's why I wanted to take the survey first to kind of make you aware. Then let's jump right into the techniques. When we're jumping into the techniques, we want to talk about the important things that you want to do. And at first, I truly believe you need to establish the ground rules. You need to establish the ground rules of your 15 participants. You need to make sure everyone understands what the ground rules are. If somebody's talking or expressing their opinion, is it fair or is it right for someone to dominate or talk over them because they have differences of opinion? Those ground rules have to be up front. We're also going to take a look at defining the objectives of the particular gathering. Critical, because everything you do is to make sure you reach the objective or the objectives. And then we're going to talk real quickly about facilitators preparation. This is critical because if the facilitator is prepared for the discussions, then the facilitator will know how to maneuver through difficult portions of the discussion based on the topics that you're going to talk about. And then we're going to wrap up our discussions real quickly. And then before we close out, I just want to talk to you about some of the opportunities that you can expand your skills and your competencies when it comes to facilitating difficult discussions and what we offer here at the Capers Business Ventures. And that's what I want to talk about. So we're going to get to that maybe at the end. Not going to ask you to buy anything. I'm just going to tell you what we offer to try to help you elevate yourself to the next level. But we really want you to focus on some of these techniques that we're going to talk about. So one of the first techniques, establish the ground rules. Establishing the ground rules. It is, you know, when you learn how to drive, if you remember, when you first learned how to drive, there were some rules. There were some ground rules that you had to understand to learn how to drive. You know, you had your little driver's manual book that you studied, and it told you, see, these are the things that you need to do and look out for. These signs mean this, and that sign means that. And you also had a test to make sure you understood what the signs and what the meaning of driving and how to drive and some of the rules and regulations. So basically, for this particular facilitating difficult discussions in DE&I, you have to define the ground rules. Now, what's important is there are 15, remember, there are 15 people participating in this conversation or participating in this training opportunity. For you as the facilitator to come in and say, these are the ground rules. We're going to do it this way and this way and this way. You may have a number of people of the 15 who may totally agree with what you say, or you may have a number of them say, whatever, I just want to get through this hour and move on. So when you have people who say, I just want to get through this, whatever you say is fine as long as I make it to the next hour and I'm out of this training. This is just one of those fill in the blank things. So it's important to make sure that the ground rules are collectively put together. And that's why have the audience come to consensus on some of the things like the definition of respectful interactions. That's important because you as the facilitator, if you define what the definition of respectful interactions are, or is, I'm sorry, what that may not resonate with some people. So you might want to have them kind of brainstorm and tell you what they think. So get on a whiteboard or whatever and write down some of the things that they believe should be a part of the overall rules of engagement. Now, that's not to say that you as a facilitator won't have any rules. You should have some, but you should also partner with your audience and have them contribute to the rules of engagement. Because when it comes to the discussions, and if the discussions gets too excited or heated or what have you, if they were the ones who established the rules of engagement, then they can remind each other of their consensus before you get started. Now, this might take a few moments. And what I suggest to you is you dedicate some time, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes to make sure that your audience, I would say no more than 15 minutes, make sure your audience has an opportunity to contribute to the ground rules. And it's very, very critical because if it's their ground rules, they're more likely to follow it. Now, some people will probably disregard that as well, but you gave them an opportunity. And if the majority of your participants are all on board with those ground rules, then I think they might be able to bring that 1, 2, 3, or whatever person or the minority group on board. But that's what you want to do, being respectful to the interactions, because that's important. Like I said, with those examples, white privilege and ghetto conditions, Black Lives Matter and Make America Great, everyone has their own opinion of each one of these particular subjects. And that's fine. That's okay. That's great. If we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, then that means there's going to be a diverse group of thinking of different topics for different reasons. So you want to make sure you set the ground rules. I would also suggest that up front you establish an acceptable time limit for opinions. Look, here's what I mean. An acceptable time limit for opinions. You don't want someone to go on and on and on and on 15, 20 minutes with his or her opinion about something, and the other 14 people don't have the equal amount of time to have their discussion, or at least express their opinion or the reason why they agree or don't agree with the person expressing their opinion. So up front, there should be an acceptable time limit for people to have their opinions heard. So what you want to try to do is balance the discussions as much as you possibly can. Now that's something the facilitator could come up with early. Just the rules of engagement, the facilitator can say, we're not going to spend more than 5 minutes or 6 minutes, 3 minutes on defending a position. So please make sure that's clear up front. Make sure that everyone understands that, again, people may not accept it, they may not agree with it, but make sure they understand that those are the ground rules and that's what we're going to follow. This is one that I believe is the entire reason why we get together in training sessions and awareness sessions or group meetings or whatever. And this is probably the area where people, they kind of lax behind more than anything. It is critical that you establish the objective of why you are gathering together. You need to establish the objective or objectives of why you're establishing, and the objectives need to be very, very clear so everyone has an understanding of the reason why we're having this discussion, the reason why we are actually in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like I said, some may think that this is just a block to fill, and this is the reason why I'm here. If that's what they think, that's fine. But put the objective up front. Make sure that the folks understand what the objectives are. Make sure that they understand what the objectives are. Also, you want to make sure that you describe a takeaway. And what I mean by that is that you want to tell them that when you leave this training, when you leave this gathering, you're going to be able to take away with you blank, whatever that blank is. That's the objective. We are trying to reach that so that when you walk away from here, you're going to be able to take away this, a better understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or a better understanding of how to communicate with people who have differences of opinions. That's good. But you want them to understand, what are we going to walk away with in this particular gathering? So again, you want to explain the purpose and the reason why you're there, part of the objective. You want to make sure that it's very clear what you want the audience, the participant, to walk away with when the training is done. And lastly, you want to make sure that you provide a roadmap. You want to make sure that you tell your audience, we're going to go here, and then afterwards we're going to go here, and afterwards we're going to go here. Now this is basically Facilitation 101. Many of you are already aware of what you need to do when you're facilitating a training course or any course. They call it an overview. Well, I call it a roadmap. You need to let your folks know, the people who are there, where you're going. And this is what is important, because if you have 4 or 5 different points that you want to make, you have to understand that there's a certain amount of time that you're going to have to cover each of those points, because if you don't, you're going to run out of time. And when you run out of time, you're not going to reach the objective. You're not going to reach the objective. And the takeaways that you want your audience to take away, they may not take away anything because it's all over the place. So make sure that when you define your objective, that you explain the specific purpose of the discussions, why you're there. You also want to describe the takeaway, what they will have when they walk away from this training. And you also want to provide the roadmap so that your participants know when you have moved on. And you also need, well, you probably will give them a handout so that they'll know when the next point is coming up. So it's important that you stay in charge there and you make sure you keep the conversation moving on. So in doing that, you have to have certain techniques and certain facilitation preparation skills ahead of even being there. And this slide here talks about some of those things that you should be prepared. Number one, be mentally prepared for what's being said and what might be said. Be mentally prepared. Again, we've got to set the ground rules early. But before you even get to the training opportunity, be mentally prepared for what might be said that you weren't ready for or the audience wasn't ready for. Expect the audience to have the differing opinions. Of course they're going to have differing opinions because they come from different backgrounds. But that's okay. When you talk diversity, you're talking about people from different backgrounds. So expect them to have different opinions and expect them to defend their opinions. That's okay. Let them do it. Hey, be aware of your own bias. Remember, you've got 15 participants. You might have a certain way of thinking about this particular topic or subject that you're talking about. And I've seen facilitators do this on more than one occasion where they have their own biases causing them to be able to ask certain questions and facilitate certain discussions in a way that falls in line with their biases. Like I think I gave, no, I know I did. I mean, on the first 4 topics, if you remember, when we talk about white privilege, and when we talk about ghetto conditions, and we talk about Black Lives Matter, and we talk about Make America Great Again, the facilitator may have strong beliefs in any one or more of those subjects. So as a facilitator, you have to be almost like a referee or a judge, but you have to be more objective, and you have to be open to hearing things that go against your biases. Because it's not about you as a facilitator, it's about the audience, it's about the participants who are there so that you can help them reach the objective. So be aware of your own biases and don't become the center of the discussions. I've seen facilitators, now think about this. I've seen facilitators who have become the topic. I've seen so many facilitators who've spent most of their time talking about their experiences in diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, again, if you only have a certain amount of time to talk or facilitate a training opportunity, and you're doing most of the talking on each of the subjects or each of the topics that you're talking about, guess who's not involved? So make sure as the facilitator that you are not the center of the discussion. Now, many might want to hear what your idea is when it comes to a certain topic. That's fine, but you remember, you are a facilitator more than you are a participant. So you want to use your techniques and be ready to relay the question to others and ask quiet participants to be more involved, and you have to use some of your training to make sure of that. Be ready to use the 5 W's and the H questions or technique, okay? The 5 W's and H question technique. If you do that, then you constantly keep the discussion moving on. Why? Why do you feel that way? How does that make you feel? As a facilitator, you have to be ready. You have to be ready. Those are your techniques. These are the things that you should be aware of prior to you even starting the facilitation training, the training opportunity, I should say, because you want to be in control, but you want to facilitate. the discussion. So make sure that you are prepared prior to this training opportunity. Make sure you are ready for what is about to come when you are doing the training. And the next thing we want to talk about is the actual discussion, the facilitating discussion, okay? All right. What I have here is, I think about it and I said, anything you should do it in a team concept. And I think you'll get more people participating when it's a team concept. And when you have 15 different teams that you're trying to facilitate, it's not going to be easy. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you assign roles. If you can assign roles. And I would also, make it so that you have people who are observers and people who are timekeepers, and ask for volunteers up front. If you don't get any volunteers, maybe you'll pick some of them. And you'll know that you've got not just yourself maintaining or managing the flow of the discussion or the flow of the training, you've got members of that group who are facilitating or helping you to facilitate with the time. You remember when I said actually have a certain amount of time for individuals to defend their opinions? See, if you've got a timekeeper, you have somebody who's paying attention to how long this participant has gone versus this participant, and that's helpful. You want to get people involved, so assign roles, especially if you got more than 10 people there. Observers. I love having observers as well, because sometimes as a facilitator, you're not able to catch everything. So the observers who you may appoint as observers, they will have a kind of like an out brief at the end. So they may not be as involved. Again, this is why you want to ask for volunteers. But you want to make sure the people who are having the discussions are diverse. You don't want them all to be all men about the same age and the same race. So make sure you have some observers, make sure you have a timekeeper, and those are the people who actually want to do that, because some people might not really want to have discussions here because they feel a certain way about the topics. And so that's for you as a facilitator to make the determination. But it's really, really, really good for you to make sure you have somebody as a timekeeper and somebody who, or more than one person who will be observers. And that way, in the end, again, if you got observers and in the end they're going to give you feedback, you have to have some time. So you need to make sure that you manage your time exceptionally well. And so the timekeepers will help. And as a facilitator, again, one of your techniques when you are trained to be a facilitator, you should understand that you may have someone having a discussion, someone explaining something or defending her position. You have to look at the nonverbals of the folks who are not speaking. That's where the conversation really lies. That's where really the discussion is. And you need, as a facilitator, you need to bring that out. So if you are giving the person who's giving her opinion straight eye-to-eye contact, which is good, but you're locked into that person, remember, what you're missing is the other 14 people who may be rolling their eyes or putting their arms crossed or shaking their head no. So you have to be very kind in how you address that individual as he or she is talking, and at the same time observe the body language of the other participants who are there. That's what a facilitator needs to do. So these are some of the techniques that you want to make sure that you're ready to excel in. And that's what this particular webinar is about. So take a look at the non-participants, the nonverbals of those people who may not be participating. Now, of course, you have an observer, and so the observer or observers might not be participating, but that's understandable because their role is to observe the nonverbals of the other participants. That's one of the things you want to talk about. Again, ask appropriate questions, the 5 W's and an H. Ask appropriate questions at appropriate time. Now, one of my favorite technique in asking a question is a relay question. If somebody said, well, Melvin Capers, what is your opinion about it? How do you feel about that? And, I can easily say, I have feelings both ways, but Mr. So-and-so, what do you think? Or don't answer the question by saying that and said, well, what do you think my opinions are based on what you know about me? And then maybe after that person answers, you can say, somebody else, what do you think? And so what do you think about what so-and-so said? So relaying the questions, but remember, do not, as a facilitator, become the center of attention. That is not your job to be the center of attention there. So understanding these techniques are very, very helpful to you. Understand that assigning the roles to 10 plus people, you have observers. You may have 2 observers. You choose the number, but you want to have good discussions, but you also want to have other people participate. Here's why it's important, before we move on. Here's why it's important to have observers during discussions that are difficult. Because when people leave this training opportunity and they go back in their work center or in their family or wherever, they still are observers. They're able to observe what's going on. They're able to give people feedback based on what they've observed. So even the observers are getting something out of this training. The timekeepers the same way, because they realize that, you know, when you have an individual who's going on and on and on about his or her opinion, the person who's the timekeeper understands that, you know, it's nice that you have an opinion, but it's fair and nice that you allow others to have opinions as well and have as equal amount of time to express their opinions as well. So those people who you are appointing the different roles to, they're getting something out of this training as well, if you facilitate it in a way where people are involved in making the rules of engagement. People are involved with timekeeping. People are involved as the observer. And people are involved because it's a diverse group, so everybody needs to be involved. And as the facilitator, make sure that you are not the center of attention. Hey, so these techniques in discussion, I love this. Let's say you have people who have some very raw feelings. You ever heard that saying, walk a day in my shoes? This is a great opportunity as a facilitator if you did role play and you allow somebody who is from a different background to role play someone else and then have the discussions. Because sometimes people are not aware of what people actually go through until they have to walk a mile a day in their shoes. So role play and have offset raw emotions. And in some cases, and if you go back to those 4 topics I talked about earlier, about white privilege and ghetto conditions, Black Lives Matter, and Make America Great Again, you may have people who have very, very, very strong emotions and beliefs based on where they come from. So if you have people to role play, maybe the discussions will be a little bit different. Or maybe, and you're not going to answer all of the concerns during the training opportunity. That's not what the objective should be, because I don't believe people will walk away from a training session and say, I am now an expert at diversity, equity, inclusion. That's not going to happen. You're going to make people aware so that when they go back to their work center, to their family, to their church, or wherever, and they're interacting with other people, they have a better understanding of how they could actually help the entire group become better, because their interactions they will be more aware of how they need to interact in a positive way. So role playing is very helpful if you're facilitating a group that has raw emotions about their opinions. Okay, and it's important that you do the best you can to balance the audience participation. You must be able to call on the quiet participant, the folks who just kind of like sit there and they want to just hide, and they believe that they're hiding and you don't see them because they're not saying anything. Now the observers, here again, these techniques could be a part of your observers worksheet, and these are some of the things that your observers could be looking at. So you call on the quiet participant. And the folks who you have, who you would call the dominant participants, those are the ones who don't really pay attention to the time limit about their opinions, and they go on and on. Well, those folks, you know, you want to be kind, and you want them to be involved, so you have to be, I guess, very selective in how you let them know that their time is up. You can say, well, you know, can you hold that thought, and let's get back to that particular topic, your topic. Let's move on to someone else. And you have to do it in a gingerly way so that it doesn't seem like you're shutting them down completely, but you have to do it in a way to make sure that the conversation continues. And again, you should not be the center of attention because you're a facilitator. You're facilitating the discussion to move forward. So you need to reserve your own opinions during the discussion. And people will try to pull you in. And know that. That's a part of your preparation. You know, govern the discussions based on the session time. Like I said, you only have a certain amount of time to discover the topics that you have. You don't want to spend too much time up front because the more time you spend up front, the less time you're going to touch or cover all of the topics that you are there to cover. Now, here are some of the other things that you need to keep in mind when you're wrapping up the discussion. You need to restate the objective and the roadmap of the discussion. Do it as frequently as you possibly can. It's important that you make sure that everyone understands that this time travel that everybody's going on in the discussion, here's where we are. You know, like when you go on a long trip on the interstate and you've got these mile markers, and you probably can recall, you know, you're trying to figure out where you are. And you're just like, oh, I'm at mile marker number whatever, or I'm at exit number whatever. And that helps you understand where you are and how far you have to go. So having that roadmap and repeating the objective and repeating the different areas that you have to cover, or you are going to cover, or you have covered, is very important to keep that conversation moving. Now, again, these are some techniques, facilitation techniques, when it comes to difficult discussions. Now, here, you see the observers need to have some time. They need to have some time. You need to allow time for the observers to do an outbrief, to be able to tell the group this is what she or he observed. Because most of the time when people are defending their opinions, they don't know, they can't recall that they did this, or they communicated in this way, or they, you know, it's like a blind spot to them. So you don't want to open up any more discussions when the observers come on, because you want the observers to give critical feedback so people can take it with them and have an understanding of how they interacted. Let me see if I can get out of the way here. I apologize. So have time, allow time for your observers to have an outbrief. Develop the list of takeaways. You remember when I talked about earlier, I said that, you know, you want to make sure you have takeaways? That's up front, but some things may come up that you didn't even think about prior to the discussions. And it might be one of those things that you go put in the parking lot during the discussion, and you said, that's a good takeaway. We can put that down as a takeaway. And what I mean by that is you already have some things that you want your audience to walk away from the discussion having and knowing about. But something new might come out. So you don't want to discard that. You want to make sure that that's a part of the takeaway. Maybe the part of the takeaway is to have a follow-up session. And it's their idea. So that's a good takeaway, and you might want to put that there. And then you want to close the session with words of encouragement. Again, folks are going to have extremely hard opinions, or I shouldn't say hard. People are going to have very close-hearted opinions. They're going to hold it very close to their hearts on what they think is right and wrong based on where they come from. They're going to have an opinion about what the definition of white privilege is, depending on who's defining it. They're going to have a definition or an opinion of right and wrong when it comes to ghetto conditions. Some people may not have ever experienced ghetto conditions, but it depends on who's defining what a ghetto is. So, again, And they may ask you as a facilitator, well, what do you mean by white privilege? And it's easy for a facilitator to put something on the whiteboard or on a slideshow and say, this is what white privilege is all about. You want your audience, the participants, to define those. You want your participants to define ghetto conditions. That way, you have a diverse group of answers, things to discuss. You want your participants to have a discussion and talk about Black Lives Matter because they have different thoughts about Black Lives Matter. They have different thoughts when it comes to Make America Great Again. It's a slogan, but people have different thoughts. And so don't define it, let them define it. But wrap up the discussion. Wrap up the discussion on some of the good things that you saw during the entire presentation. Some of the things that the observers found during that. Give them some appreciation and show them some appreciation of taking the time to be observers. It's important for each one of your participants to one time or another be an observer in their own workplace, in their own family, in their church, or wherever, so that they can observe the behavior and interactions of others. Very important to end it on a note where everybody is taking away something positive. So that's why you want to close the session with words of encouragement. Now, 15 people are not going to change the landscape of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But 15 people can actually have a facilitation opportunity with 15 more. And those 15 more can have 15 more, and that's how you spread it. Having conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, difficult discussions, but it should go on. And it should be one of those things that go on frequently. And people should be comfortable having conversations about what they think, because you want them to walk away with an understanding of something that they didn't have before. So these are the things that you want to make sure of when you are facilitating difficult discussions. So let's see, what else we got? All right. So here's where we've been, real quickly. We've had just a quick survey. I call it a survey. Well, it wasn't really a survey, but it's just something I wanted you to absorb at the beginning when I talk to you about, what comes to mind when you talk about those 4 topics: white privilege, and it could be anything, by the way. I just want you to say, I want you to see, I should say, that if you put topics or words or phrases up there that's going to cause people to have different opinions, that's a good way to start. But don't make it the opinions of yourself. Don't make it that this is the definition of white privilege. This is the definition of ghetto conditions. This is the definition of Black Lives Matter. This is the definition of Make America Great Again. What you want to do is you want to be able to have just some things to get people going, to get people thinking, because it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. And you also want to remember your facilitation techniques or skills. And some of those techniques is, you need to establish the ground rule. Make sure folks are on board with the ground rules. And if it's your ground rules, then you're too much of the center of attention there. So you may have some ground rules to contribute, and you should, but also get your participants to come up with ground rules too, because their ground rules, they're going to follow their ground rules. And when they don't, the observers may say, so-and-so came up with his ground rules, but he didn't even follow them. And that person might not even be aware that he was not following his own ground rules. And maybe he will walk away understanding that he's got to be more cognizant of what he is saying when he's in a group environment. You also want to define the objectives. Remember, you got to define the purpose. Why are we here? What is the reason why we are here? And a lot of people might think when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion is just to check the box to say that I had the training. So make sure it is very clear of the reason why the gathering has happened. Make sure that people understand, and this is what we're trying to do. When you leave here, we want you to be able to have this. whatever this is. Make sure you give the roadmap when you're talking about the objective. Make sure you give the roadmap when you're talking about the objective. You also want to be prepared. As a facilitator, it's on you. You have to be prepared prior to having any type of facilitation opportunity or training opportunities where you're standing in front of a group of people. Make sure, as the facilitator, you are not the center of the discussion. You are there to help guide the discussion, to facilitate the discussion, to move it from one place to another. You're not there to say, this is what I think and you all should be following the way I think. That's not a facilitator. That's a lecturer. You don't want to be a lecturer. So make sure that you are prepared. Make sure that you're facilitating the discussions. And your preparations will help you. And again, I will tell you, you're going to find things. You're going to be prepared to hear things prior to the training opportunity. And then during the training opportunity, you're going to be surprised to learn things that you never thought you would hear. So you need to be prepared when you are facilitating discussions to hear anything and everything. And just maintain the control of the discussion. And before it's all over, you want to wrap up the discussions and try to make it everybody, you may not have everybody walking in a kumbaya type of feeling, but you'll have people walking out with an appreciation that they had the discussion. And you should be applauded if you have people who want to continue these types of training with you as a facilitator. That is a huge compliment when you have people say that you did that very well. We would love to have you facilitate our next session. That means that you did exactly what you needed to do as a facilitator. Why am I even saying this? A facilitator is a facilitator, so she would know exactly what needs to be done. No, not all the time. So what happens is you want to make sure that people are prepared. And you also want to have observers of people who are facilitating to give that facilitator feedback as well. And it may not be the 15th participant. It may be a colleague of the facilitator or a supervisor of the facilitator, but somebody, and I would even suggest recording the session so that the facilitator can see how she facilitated the actual discussion, the actual training opportunity. So it's all about trying to get to a better place as a facilitator or someone who's facilitating difficult discussions in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is not easy. That's why it's called difficult discussions. But we're talking diversity. We're going to have more than one thought process. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to make sure that you got something out of this, and we can help you learn more here at the Capers Business Ventures. It is our objective to be trainers and facilitators and people to help others get to the next level. We want to help you expand your skills and the opportunities and your competencies so that you can make a positive difference in your organization, within your church, within your family. We want to help you be able to get to a better place. And we try to keep it as simple as possible. And I call it my yellow book way of doing things. And what I mean by that, I try to keep it as simple as possible. You remember when you used to go to the bookstore and you go look for how to, I don't know, how to build a tree house for dummies, and it's usually in a yellow book and all those yellow books. Well, that's the way I usually look at things, in a yellow book type of way. I try to keep it as simple as possible. And it's sometimes it's not simple when you're talking diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sometimes it's not simple when you're talking about difficult discussions. But I'm trying to get the information across to you in as simple a way as I can. And we do that at Capers Business Ventures. We do it in more than one way. We have different opportunities that we constantly offer. And here are those opportunities. We offer training and coaching. We have coaching packages that we offer. And what we want to do is make sure that if you want to be coached, we'll put you in the right coaching program. I've got 4 that I have offering. I have a coaching program and learning how to be a better communicator. That's a coaching program I have. I'll have something come up on that in the coming weeks. We'll have another webinar on the speaking and coaching and what that particular package looks like. We also have a coaching package on entrepreneurship, and this is for people who want to start their own business. Now, you've got many folks out there who can help others start their business, but we have a coaching package where we'll kind of guide you through the initial steps of starting a business. That's the entrepreneur coaching package. We also have a leadership package. I love the leadership package. I used to really get into the leadership training a long time ago when I served in the military. So that's 3 of the package. Then we have a self-development coaching package. So we have 4 different coaching packages that is available at Capers Business Ventures. And again, please visit our website. I said again, I never told you this, but visit our website and you'll see that website there at cbvservices.com/home. I am a John Maxwell certified coach, speaker, and trainer. So I've got the training and I can help you in the coaching area. And the speaking area is one of those coaching packages I said. Training is the leadership part. It's what we do in the leadership part of putting training packages together, come into your organization and help you put together any kind of training that you have. I also have online courses and have an opportunity for you to purchase any online course that we offer. And as we move further along in the next calendar year and 2022, we are going to have more and more coaching opportunities. Going to have a lot of online courses, speaking engagements. I also am one who would do keynote speeches. I just did one a short time ago in a summit, virtual summit that we had that I truly enjoyed. So I do speeches as well, keynotes, and we'd love also for you to join our community. And I'm kind of like in the way here, but we have a community that's similar to Facebook, but it's not Facebook. It is a personalized community that only members of CBV services, only the members of the Capers Business Ventures will be a part of this community. And again, this is where you can go. You can join at the community.cbvservices.com. And if you're not able to get in there, please send me an email. Get in touch with me and let me know. But I believe that when we do these coaching packages, these programs, and you want some individual coaching, and you might even be interested in some of the group coaching packages that I have, it's really good to be a part of this group or this community, because you're going to have people who have something in common with you, who are trying to get to the same place, to the next level. And sometimes it's not always about what I have to say to you, but sometimes people who are on the journey that are on the journey that's similar to yours, they can help you as well. They can be an accountability partner, and we can always do this together. So these are some of the things that, some of the contact information that you could use to get in touch with me. My email, please send me emails. Send me emails at melvin.capers@cbvservices.com. And I will respond to those. There's my telephone number there. I have a 1-877 number. People always ask me, well, why do you do a 1-877 number? Well, they ran out of 1-800 numbers. They ran out of 1-866 numbers. So I have a 1-877 number. And then here again, if you want to get into the community, it's called the Level Up Community. Go ahead and community.cbvservices.com. If you have any problems getting in there again, just let me know. And I will help you become a member, and I am looking to open up membership in 2022. So please feel free to join us at the CBV services. I call it the Level Up Community, and in that community, I have rooms. All right, I have rooms. So if you sign up for a certain coaching package, say for instance you signed up for entrepreneur. You want to learn how to be an entrepreneur, or start your own business. And what I have there is I have a room specifically for those people who want to learn how, or want coaching and how to start their own business. And the other members of the community will not have access to that unless they have applied to be in that particular room. And not everybody is going to be allowed in all of the rooms. I want to make sure that the rooms or the spaces are there for you so that you can get something out of it. So please send me an email. Visit my website, cbvservices.com/home. Let me see. I'm gonna put the contact information back up here. See that? cbvservices.com/home. I really invite you to go to that website, find out a little bit more about me, and also find out some of the things I've done. I have a podcast too, by the way. I've been doing a podcast, been having a grand old time doing podcasts. And I would even invite you to join me and come on, subscribe to my podcast. And I also ask you and invite you, if you'd like to be a guest, to come on board. Let's get you on. I've had authors on. I've had entrepreneurs on, brand new entrepreneurs. I've had influencers on. I've had leaders. I've had preachers and teachers. And this is what I always said. I had authors, entrepreneurs, influencers, leaders, preachers, and teachers. They've been on my podcast, and we've had a ball about it. And so for those of you who might want to be starting your own business, and you want to jump on a podcast and talk about your business, and we get people around the world to know what you're doing and how to get in touch with you, it's called the Connect Podcast, Capers Business Ventures Connect Podcast, and that's what I use. And I have fun doing it. I love meeting people, and I've got some real good stuff. So please go out to my podcast. Again, it's called Capers Business Ventures Connect Podcast. You do the search on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of the podcast directories, you'll find me. And you can also go cbvservices.com/podcast if you're interested in becoming a guest. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you. Listen, I wanted to talk to you today about the techniques of discussing or being a facilitator with difficult discussion. And we talk specifically about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The techniques that we talked about can be used in any subject that you're facilitating. If you want to learn more about how to facilitate whatever topic or subject that you have, get in touch with me. We're here to help. Not only that, it is our objective and our mission to make sure we help you elevate to the next level of excellence. I want to thank you all for taking the time to visit with me on this live broadcast. I can't wait to see you. And like I always say when I sign off, we will see you the next time.